Hello everybody. I am Dr. M. Anjani Tevis. You can of course call me Anjani. And this is a level 2 breath class. This is taking our full body breath with more than 40 diaphragms and using it to generate motion and structural support and integrity. So the way I did this last week, and I really thought that was nice, was that I started off with a short guided practice to bring us all into arm and leg breathing and right and left side breathing. And then once we're all doing that, then we can all just keep doing that as I talk about, as I give you some conceptual background for what we're going to do. And then you'll just be ready to go. You'll already be in the mode because you'll be creating a concentric expanding sausage breath, and that expands and collapses, and you'll already be in the practice of switching from side to side, which is kind of the sort of the jump off place where we can go ahead and then start to use this power of pressure gradient change for fun and decreased wear and tear. So let me just show you all our favorite picture, the bladder view of the thoracic diaphragm. And actually, you know what we'll do? So what I want everybody to do is find a comfortable upright posture where, and I'm going to talk you through this a little bit, because what I'm going to want you to do is I want you to have an upright posture where you can breathe. That doesn't mean that you can't lean back on something. What it does mean is that you have to take the curve out of your lumbar spine. So if you're leaning back on something, just make sure you have your knees at an angle and support in your back so that you are not hyperextending your lumbar spine. Let me talk a little bit about hyperextending of the lumbar spine. So let me shift around here. And then once we have this little chat on posture, and this is very important because without this long lumbar spine, we're not going to be able to make use of our hydraulic system. So how do we find a position that we can breathe in? We're all basically in this country, pretty much everybody is walking around or sitting around hyperextended. Just because, I mean, even just from the 12 years most people spend in school, bent over a book or a desk or whatever, we develop this bad habit of hyperextension. So, and as we've talked about in the level 1 class, if the lumbar spine is hyperextended, right? This is hyperextension here. You see this curve going that way? I can't breathe here. This is like having a parachute that is turned inside out. It is not going to function for me. Remember, we want to get this motion on the back wall of the body. So we need to have the lumbar spine be long. How do we find where it's long? Well, let's start by having a position where we are seated. And let's first just notice where we feel the pressure on our sit bones. If we are slouching, go ahead and slouch, everybody. You know you want to do it. Just go ahead and slouch. Slouch, and why do we like to slouch? Because it's easier to move the back of the diaphragm when we slouch, right? So we slouch, right? And when we slouch, feel for your sit bones there in your butt. And notice that when you're slouched, you're on the back slope. Like if your sit bone is like this, you're sitting on the back slope of your sit bone. So now what we're going to do is we're going to roll forward on the sit bone to where people think of sitting up straight. When we tell people to sit up straight, what they end up doing is they hyperextend the back so that they can change the angle of the upper back. But to overdo this is to hyperextend, and we won't get a breath back there. So what we want to do actually is we want to feel where the back is. Roll forward and feel where the front is. See the hyperextension? And now go back to slouching. And now this time when we roll forward, what we're going to do is we're going to roll forward until we reach the place where we can feel that we're no longer on the back and no longer on the front, where we are on the transition point. Now, for a lot of us, that might mean that when we find that position, that our upper back is not going to be as upright as we would like it to be. And I have to ask you to be patient with that. I want to ask you to tolerate being a little slouched in the upper back at first, because what we have to do to deal with that is not change the angle of the lumbar spine. We have to work on changing the angle between the vertebral segments of the upper back, of the thoracic. And we will get to that, but we're probably not going to get to that today. So I want you to be a little tolerant of when you find your transition point. Maybe you're still like this a little bit with your head forward. Okay, that's okay for right now. The main thing is when you find the transition point, see if you can breathe in your back. See what extension you can get in your upper back without compromising the lower back, without hyperextending the lower back to tilt the upper back backward, right? We want to just extend the upper back without making it happen in the low spine. So if you have to stop here, no problem, stop here. And then at some point we'll talk about how to get extension in the upper back without driving the lumbar spine forward, right? So find the transition point between the front and the back of the sit bones, and I want you all to start breathing. And I want you to kind of, ideally, like Tatiana, you're going to be in a place where you can look at the screen while you practice, okay? If you need to go from seated to standing, that's no problem, as long as you know how to keep your lumbar spine long while you're standing. And we won't go into that right now. But if you know how to keep your lumbar spine long while standing, go ahead and stand up too. Ideally, be looking at me. What I'm going to do as I start off this, this little practice, I'm also going to take you through a slideshow. Okay, slideshow, which is going to be right here. There we go. I'm going to take you through a little slideshow. Oh no. Oh, hold on. Sorry. Hey, Stefan, will there be a ton of that?
Periodically. Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, let's space it out in this next 45 minutes. That's great. To whatever extent we can. To whatever extent we can. Okay. Sorry, a very kind gentleman is finishing work in my office. So, let me get my slideshow. So let's start breathing from the bottom of the pelvis up to the top of the chest and emptying from the top of the chest down to the bottom of the pelvis. Remembering that the most important instruction when you practice breathing is to let it be as easy as possible. To let it be something that is relaxed, something that is softly expansive. Almost as if you're not going to be doing anything yourself, as if you're just going to allow the universe to breathe through you. Now, the only muscle that we have to move in order to get your best breath looks like the picture on the screen if you're standing on your bladder, looking up at it, looking up at your chest. You would see the diaphragm, a sheet of muscle and connective tissue that's attached to the bottom of the sternum, the bottom of the rib cage. There's the tip of the 12th rib, transverse process of L1, front of the lumbar spine down to L3, L4. So as you practice breathing from the bottom of the pelvis up to the top of the chest, I want you to bring your mind to the borders of the diaphragm where you know it's attached to the bottom of the sternum, the bottom of the ribs, and the front of the lumbar spine. Notice the sensations you have at the borders of the diaphragm as you inhale and exhale. Remember, breathing produces changing sensations. The sensations of inhalation are the sensations of contraction, right? It's a sheet of muscle, so it can contract and relax. The sensations of exhalation are the sensations of relaxation of that muscle. So notice where you feel most of the sensation of breathing. For those of you who've been doing this for a while, you're probably feeling more of the sensation on the back of your body than you are at the front. And if you're not today, or you haven't really gotten to the point where that's where you feel most of the breathing, sensation of breathing, no problem. Just bring your mind now to the back of the diaphragm where you know it's attached, to the front of the lumbar spine, the transverse process of L1, and the bottom of the rib cage. And I want you to, on your next inhalation, allow the breath to come in at L4 and let it roll up your spine. Let it roll up the front of the lumbar spine. And it will broaden at L1. And you'll feel a ripple roll around the bottom of the rib cage on each side of the body and meet at the front, at the sternum. You'll feel a ripple roll around the bottom of the rib cage like a wave rolling around a boulder, being split by a boulder at the edge of the ocean. Feel those two beads of breath roll around the bottom of the rib cage. Feel them crash into each other at the sternum, and feel those two waves add to each other just behind the sternum, giving your sternum a little lift without trying. Remember, all we have to do is start the breath. All we have to do is start the breath on the front of the lumbar spine, and then we let it roll up and we let it move forward like a wave, like a ripple. Let the breath fill your chest for you. Let the waves move around at their own chosen speed, at the tissue's chosen speed. Let the wave crash into the other wave up there from the other side. Let them crash into each other, and let that crashing fill your chest just a little bit more. And then release through the organ pipes. Everywhere you generated sensation, allow a wave of relaxation to follow in the wake of that wave of contraction. Feel two waves that come from the side body toward the midline right after the two waves crash at the sternum. So the breath comes up from L4. It rolls around the bottom of the rib cage, meets at the sternum, crashes into itself and adds. And shortly thereafter, if you allow it, that you will feel a wave from the side of the body, moving toward the midline on both sides. A wave from the side that meets at the midline. And that will be followed by a wave of contraction that comes up the back of the diaphragm, meeting the wave of contraction coming up from the front, from the bottom of the diaphragm to on the front of the body. So those two waves will meet and add. So we're going to have 3 different sets of waves that crash into each other, add constructively, and give you just a little bit more room to move. And now let's make sure that our tongues are on the roof of the mouth. The tongue should be flat on the roof of the mouth. And I want you to bring your awareness to the edge of the tongue, where the teeth emerge from the gums. Feel that horseshoe shape of sensation around the edge of the tongue, where your teeth emerge from your gums. And in a moment, what we're going to do is we're going to swallow in a moment. But when we swallow, we're going to let that swallow create a wave of sensation that rolls across the palate, from the tip of the tongue toward the back of the throat, through the tongue, and you'll feel it, a wave press up against the palate, from the front to the back as you swallow. What I'm going to want you to do is I want you to take a good breath in, and then you're going to let that breath out, releasing deeply, surrendering deeply through the organ pipes. The slideshow is distracting. Don't pay any attention to it, because the breathing is more important. The tongue is on the roof of the mouth. And what we're going to do at the bottom of our next exhalation is we're going to swallow. We're going to let that wave move across the roof of the mouth. And when the wave gets to the back of the throat, that's when you're going to inhale. And I want you to allow that inhalation to rise up your neck and pull your head back. We'll translate your head backward over your shoulders, resolving head forward posture to whatever extent. So let me just talk you through that. I'm going to let the breath come in at L3, L4. It's going to climb. It's going to split. It's going to roll around the bottom of the rib cage. It's going to meet at the sternum. It's going to generate waves coming from the sides of the body that wave toward the middle, the midline. It's going to generate a wave from the back that meets a wave from the front. All 3 of these waves are going to add and increase the stroke volume every time they crash into each other. And the tongue is on the roof of the mouth. And we're going to take that really nice big inhale in. And then we're going to release deeply through the organ pipes, surrender deeply through the organ pipes. And when the wave gets to, and when we get to the bottom of our exhalation, we'll swallow as the pelvic floor lifts, inhale, and let that breath translate us backward. Now I want you to notice that the pulling sensation at the front of the throat and under the chin begins almost immediately as soon as you begin your inhalation at L4. On your next inhalation, notice that you feel a pulling sensation here as soon as as that breath gets to L4. That means that your head has the potential to start filling with breath the moment you start to feel that sensation. So on your next inhalations, I want you to be ready. I want you to be ready with enthusiasm to allow your head to fill like a balloon the moment you feel that wave come up from L4. And that means you need to be ready to let all of the 20 plus diaphragms in the head come online immediately as soon as your inhale starts at L4. When you do this, you're going to notice that your head fills with breath before your chest fills with breath. And it's going to fill to the point where your head will overflow, like a vase overflowing with water. And as it overflows, that breath wave, that gentle wave, is going to come down from your head towards your shoulder girdle. And interestingly enough, it will get there at the same time that the wave coming from the bottom to the top hits the shoulder girdle. When those waves meet, they add and they will expand your shoulder girdle concentrically. This will also help you resolve kyphosis and head forward posture. And when you exhale, make sure you are emptying the back of the shoulder girdle. You're relaxing deeply at the borders of the diaphragm that are close to the spine. And as you surrender there, see if you can allow that surrender to draw away pressure, to draw pressure off of your shoulder girdle, especially in the back, top of the shoulders. So we're going to let all those diaphragms come online. As soon as we start to feel that pulling sensation, let it take your lower jaw back and down. And when you allow that motion to happen in your lower jaw, feel the flux that happens in the floor of the mouth. And as you feel that flux, that pulling in with inhalation and puffing back out with exhalation, like the bullfrog place, as you feel that, notice that when you feel that motion, you also feel an expanded sense of breath in your head, right in the center of the head. And the lower jaw carries the tongue back and down, and the tongue suction to the palate draws the palate back and down. And then bring your mind to the roof of the nasal cavity, right between your eyes, just a little below your eyes. And feel that area as you inhale get drawn down with inhalation. Feel it lift back up with exhalation. Feel the breath flooding the midline of your body when you allow motion to happen in the roof of the nasal cavity. Now let's bring your mind to the cheeks and let the cheeks be soft and relaxed. Let them hug your teeth with inhalation. Let them puff back out with exhalation. Feel how you can breathe right through your cheeks, your whole face. Almost your whole face. Now let's bring your mind to the nose flaps, this triangle on each side of your nose. And I want you to allow the nose flaps to be drawn in with inhalation. Let them puff back out as you exhale. And feel how now you can breathe through the entire footprint of your nose. Is that working? There you go. The entire footprint. And now let's bring your mind to the eardrums at the medial ends of your ear canals. Let them be drawn in by your inhalation. Let them puff back out as you exhale. And feel the very gentle tidal current of air that starts to move through your ear canal as you inhale and exhale, allowing your ears to participate in your breathing process. And now the temples. Let the temples move. Let them be drawn in by your inhalation. Let them drift back out with your exhalation. And feel the cooling off of your frontal lobes as you allow your temples to participate in moving air and fluid in the body, to participate in pressure gradient change. And now let's bring your mind to your eyeballs, sitting in your eyeball sockets. Notice that when you inhale, your eyeballs pull back into your head. It's a very subtle motion, just a little nudge, but it's a very powerful motion. Let your eyeballs be drawn in with inhalation. Let them drift back out with exhalation. Let your eyeballs move. For those of you who've been practicing with this, or even if you haven't, go ahead. Explore the cornea, the lens, the iris within the eyeball. All diaphragms, all capable of participating in pressure gradient change as you inhale and exhale. And now let's do some arm and leg breathing. Oops. Let me make sure that you've got some pelvic floors out there. So go ahead and take a nice big breath in and feel for the motion inside your abdomen where your organs are, especially just here, just below the sternum in this empty epigastric space right here. So go ahead and feel for motion of organs inside your abdomen as you inhale and exhale. Remember, head is still expanding right from the beginning of the inhalation, still collapsing back down every time you exhale. But at the same time, you feel motion inside the abdomen. And this feels very similar to the motion of seaweed waving in the tide, because your organs wave. When you inhale, they wave down towards your tail with the pressure filling your chest. And when you exhale, they lift up towards your head. Feel for the motion of your organs inside your abdomen. See if you can feel them move on the back wall of your abdomen. Now, every time we exhale, we're going to relax more deeply with each exhalation. And as we do, we're going to notice that that sense of drawing in the abdomen goes deeper and deeper through the abdomen pelvis toward the pelvic floor as we continue to relax. And at some point, we're going to relax so deeply that we are going to move all the air we've got to move. But we are still relaxing. If you're still relaxing when the air stops moving, keep relaxing. Don't feel like you have to inhale just because the air stopped moving. Just keep relaxing until that sense of drawing reaches your pelvic floor. And when it does, it will give it a little lift. The organs are all being drawn up. Eventually, the pelvic floor, organs drawn up, eventually the pelvic floor will go too. Let the pelvic floor be drawn up at the end of your exhalation. Right after it lifts, it's going to fall down. When it does, it's going to pull on your organs. It's going to fill your pelvis. It's going to change the angle of your sacrum. And that will initiate a wave at L4 that will roll up your spine, filling the head and the chest simultaneously and allowing them to expand concentrically at the shoulder girdle. Now let's add some arms and legs. So on our next inhalation, what we're going to do is we're going to, can you get my feet here? We're going to lift the toes. We're going to squeeze all the muscles of the lower extremities right up to the butt cheeks, right up to and including the butt cheeks on the inhalation. And when we exhale, we're going to let everything relax. So let's try that. We're going to get to the bottom of our next exhalation. We're going to feel the pelvic floor lift. And when it drops, we're going to engage. And we're going to appreciate how much more breath we can take when we allow 6 more diaphragms to participate in the breathing process. And you can probably see how I'm actually being lifted and lowered. Oops, let's do that one more time. Lifted and lowered by the breath filling my lower body. Excellent. Now let's add the upper extremities. What we're going to do is we're going to spread the fingers and palms, but we're not going to do this. We're not going to hyperextend. Remember, a hyperextended diaphragm, this is a diaphragm, a hyperextended diaphragm is like a parachute turned inside out, right? We want it to be more of a dish shape. We want to be able to catch something in that sail, right? So when we engage all the muscles of the upper extremities, make sure you include the latissimus back here. So your armpit, when you do that, will become deep like this, okay? So when I inhale, I'm going to lift my toes and do everything I did with my legs, but I'm going to engage all the muscles of the upper extremities as well. And just appreciate what a massive breath a person can take when they use the 12 peripheral diaphragms that we know about so far. And notice how much longer your breath can be, how much easier it is to take a longer breath when you have more diaphragms online. The more diaphragms you have online, the longer it will take for that wave of contraction to move through the entire system. And we want every diaphragm to participate because we want the largest, smoothest stroke volume, the largest, easiest, smoothest stroke volume that we can access. So arm and leg breathing. After our next exhalation, we're going to start to do side to side breathing. So we're going to inhale, and we're going to engage the arm and leg on the right side first, and then the arm and leg on the left side. So and then when I've emptied all the way down to the bottom of my pelvis on the right side, I'll do on the left side. And notice how when you do this alternating side breath, one side of your body will get longer and fatter than the other side. And you will even notice a larger volume of air passing through the nostril of the side of the body that you're engaging. So go ahead and practice breathing with arms and legs. Practice side to side breathing. Take breaks from arm and leg breaths, from side to side breaths, and just take breaths with the thoracic diaphragm and see if you can maintain your breath as I talk about some things. And alternate, like go through, oh, okay, I've done enough side to side for now. I'm just going to do my arms and legs both side, or I'm just going to breathe with the whole thoracic diaphragm. Or if you want to try this, try breathing with the two sides without any visual motion of the arms and legs, without any willful intent in the arms and legs. See if you can alternate sides. You might find one side is easier to get more breath through than the other. All the more reason to practice alternating sides. Okay? So you guys keep practicing that. I'm sorry if this slideshow was distracting. I think it was a failed experiment, but because I'm going to show it to you again, I'm going to show you some things now. I think we'll go ahead and we will start with this really wonderful video on the jellyfish. And then we will move on from there. So let me screen share. Oops. Oops, that's not it. Hold on. Hold on. There we go. So,
the entrancing
everybody see my
ballet
little
of the
screen
jellyfish.
share?
So graceful, so efficient.
Got it? You see?
Scientists have long known how economic jellyfish locomotion is, but a new study exposes a hidden energy-saving trick that the creatures use to get around the ocean. It looks like jellyfish are kicking to move around, but really, they and an unrelated and horrifying creature called a lamprey actually pull themselves through the water. Look at this video the researchers made. The red part on the lamprey is high pressure, normal for a critter cutting through the water, but the blue stuff, that's low pressure. It turns out that the undulations of jellyfish and lamprey bodies create low pressure vortices, like you'd find in the eye of a hurricane or tornado. That resulting low pressure sucks in water, helping propel the creatures. And the suction is so powerful that it's the dominant force in the animal's forward thrust. Let's see your Dyson do that. Because jellyfish and lampreys are so distantly related, the researchers reckon that this trick of physics may be widespread in the animal kingdom, and not just in the oceans. Bird wings may actually exploit it as well, giving the creatures an extra little kick. And the discovery could work its way into machines.
Okay. Yes. It is, this mechanism is widespread in nature. It's widespread in our own bodies. In fact, we can create vortices at every diaphragmatic complex in our body. And as we know, there are 40 of them. The place where we can make the biggest the biggest vortices, though, are at the back of the diaphragm, close to the spine. So now let me show you another little video. That is, let me show you one more little video here that will help to also, because what we're trying to do now, the goal of this class is to try to generate, close these things, where did my thing go here? Is to try to access our hydraulic system. That's not the right thing. Here we go. It's to access our hydraulic system. So now let's look at this other video because it might help us to, let me make sure I can keep it quiet. So I want to show you these guys. These are, these are just tubes with fans in the bottom of them that blow air through the tubes. And as you can see, when the pressure fills up the tube develops structure and motion, right? We can use our diaphragm to generate pressure change within our bodies very in a very similar fashion. It's just we have a lot more potential for delicate control of how we generate this motion. So good. All right, and then I have one more video for you, one more thing to take a look at. And that is right here. Oh, actually, I have, where'd it go? Where is it? Hold on. Nope, hold on. Where's my little video? Oops. Let me try this again. I'm not sure where it is. It must be, oh, there we go. All right. This is a party favor. Again, we're seeing how a changing pressure gradient through this party favor allows it to expand and collapse, okay? With these three visuals in mind, let's now talk about how to move the body. So the way we normally think about moving the body in modern science is we think that a muscle shortens, and when that muscle shortens, it draws two bones closer together, and that's true. And that does work. So by utilizing this way of thinking and using the body, if I shorten this muscle, see this muscle here? If I shorten this muscle, it will pull the back of my head around to the midline of my body. And if I want, and the other thing that happens when I shorten this muscle is that the brain hears me tugging, yanking on this muscle over here, and says, oh, I better relax this muscle over here. So it inhibits it. It sends an inhibitory impulse to the muscle on the other side. So if by this mechanism, this is what it looks like to rotate the head back and forth. And you can see this is my range of motion. The place where I start to feel a pinch is right about here, right? I feel it more on this side than I do on this side today, right? So what we want to do, though, is experiment with a different way of moving the body. We want to see what could happen if we use pressure change instead. So when I do this, what I'm going to do, as I do right and left side breathing, I'm going to feel for a sense of pressure filling me up from bottom to top. And then I want you to, and obviously it goes more like this, it goes more like this, right? So that's going to fill you in all directions. But when you exhale, I want you to release the pressure, and I want you to feel it like your body is a tank of water with a skeleton inside of it. And that water level is dropping down through the body, all the way to the pelvic floor, all the way through the bottom of the feet, if you can relax long enough and soft enough and let that happen. I know you can, actually. So when we do right and left side breathing, what we're going to do is we're going to feel one side, and again, it goes up like this, fills, right? So this whole side will be puffy. And you may even notice as you do your right and left side breathing, as you fill a side, it kind of displaces you from the midline. You get pushed away from the side of greater pressure. And when you let that pressure out, it brings you back to the midline. If you keep letting pressure out, if you keep letting the water level drop, you'll drift. And then when you fill, you'll go further. So when we do our alternate side breathing, we're going to fill, right? And then we're going to let the water level drop down. We're going to feel it going through the top of our head, behind our eye, nose, behind the mouth, the front of the throat, through the, all the way down this side of the body. Okay? When we do our right and left side breathing. And then when we feel that pelvic floor lift over here, or we feel the lifting in the diaphragms of the lower extremity on that side, then we can inhale on the other side. And when we inhale on the other side, it goes up, and then we empty from top to bottom. Now it's this dropping pressure level that is going to generate the motion for us. At first, we will actually be able to become a lot more specific with it than you might imagine. I'm sure that at some point we'll all be able to be a lot more specific with it than I can imagine right now. So, because it's really not that hard. So let's do this. Let's see what it feels like first to do your right and left side breathing and feel the fluid level fill up and push you a little over, and then empty, let yourself come back to neutral. Once you've come back to neutral, we're going to keep going that same direction. So we'll empty from the top of the head down to the bottom of the pelvis, let it drift us across a little away from the midline. When we get to the place where the pelvic floor lifts, we're going to fill up the other side and let it displace us further. I'm obviously exaggerating that so you guys can see, but it's going to push us further. When we let that pressure out, the first release of that pressure is going to bring us back to neutral, and then we'll empty from the top to the bottom again. Okay? And I think it's really helpful once you come back to neutral, just start on the top of the other side and feel it drop down, because we don't want to leave residual pressure in any part of the body that we want to flex or approximate. We have to get the pressure out of the way of the motion. So right and left side breathing. And you're going to, actually, what I'm going to do, I'll give myself a little visual aid for you guys. I'll put myself right here with that line above my head. And then, and you will see it's subtle. I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit, but you'll see that I do shift a little side to side. So now I'm letting the pressure out on the right, more so than the left. I relaxed, I left the left hand and foot engaged while I relaxed the right hand and foot. And now that I'm down to the bottom of my pelvis, I'm going to engage this side. And you see that drifted me further from the midline. And when I just let that pressure out, I'm now back at the center. Now I'm going to empty from the top to the bottom on this side. Now I'll fill the right. Let's do 2 more breaths like that to each side. I'm going to empty right, top to bottom. Now fill the left. And I want you to feel for a sense of yourself, your body being pushed by your own breath. Empty top to bottom on the left. Top to bottom on the right. Top to bottom on the left. Good. Now let's see if we can apply that same sense of pushing to turning the head. So I'm going to fill my whole body with pressure, and then I'm going to let this empty out. Now, when I let it empty out, as I let it empty out, my head will get drawn into the negative pressure, and I will let that emptying go right through my neck. And when it gets to the bottom of my neck, right, I'm just turning my neck right now. I'm not going to turn my torso. I'm just going to turn my neck. But I'm going to keep emptying. I'm going to keep a continuous awareness of that pressure level dropping through the side of my body. And as I do, that continuing generation of negative pressure is going to continue to turn my head quite a bit further. Let me again show you what my range of motion is like, and pinching starts there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pressurize the whole system. And I'm relaxing The right side preferentially to the left, behind the eye, the nose, the mouth, the jaw, down the side of the neck, thoracic spine, lumbar spine, sacrum, pelvic floor. Then I fill up over here. I want to feel for a sense of the breath pushing my head further into rotation. When I let that pressure out, it brings me back to the midline passively. I'm going to start from top to bottom. Forehead, behind the eye, nose, mouth, left neck, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, pelvis. Inhale on the right. I let that pressure that pushed me further out, and I come back to the midline. Let's do that again. Empty the right side, eyeball, find the nose, mouth, neck, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, pelvis. The inhalation pushed me further. The exhalation, the beginning of the exhalation brings me back to neutral. Empty the forehead, behind the eye, nose, mouth, jaw, left neck, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, pelvis. I fill up the body and I add pressure to the system to push me further and then to reel me back. There is another layer of motion that's happening here, and perhaps some of you are already feeling it. The other layer of motion, I've pointed it out a couple times already, is that my body is actually expanding in the long way. It's tractioning out. It's getting longer when I inhale. So when I get to this end range of motion, I'm not just cranking my head this way. As I inhale, it's lifting my head up off my spine, separating each vertebra all the way down my spine as I inhale. That is what really helps. That goes a long way to eliminate any sense of pinching. Now it's just as important, once I've elongated out and I'm in my full rotation, that when I exhale, I let myself compress back into the spine. So I lift up and then I come back in. This is really key. This little expansion and collapse is a superpower. Trust me. So now let me take a look at everybody real quick. Let me break us off and let me see. Does everybody feel like you can feel how the breath pushes your head and brings it back to the midline? Can I get some thumbs up? Thumbs up. David, Tatiana, Grace. It's okay. We'll come back. She's a pro. She's like my other TA. Well, I've got a couple TAs, 3 TAs, and she's one of them. So she can nap if she wants. All right, so now let me come back to me. Let me pin myself again. Hold on. Speaker view. Oops. There we go. All right, so now let's look at side bending. So side bending, same thing. We want to let the pressure drop down through the head, the neck, the chest, the abdomen, the pelvis. Even though we are only going to be, oh, what was better? Let's bring you in close. Even though I'm only going to be moving my neck, the pressure that I release from the right side of my sacrum as I empty down is going to add So I'm going to tell you when I've gone all the way down through the neck, when I start to go through the chest, I want you to notice how much more range of motion I achieve, how much more healthy range of motion with no pinching, no pain, no squish, no forcing. I want you to see how much more range of motion I achieve from emptying my chest, my lumbar, my sacrum. Okay, so as I empty those parts, I'll tell you when I'm emptying them, and you'll be able to see that I am I'm getting that most of this motion is actually generated by my emptying this side of the body. Most of my motion is generated by emptiness. How cool is that? You have the capacity to create vortices in your body, and those vortices can give you a very special kind of motion, and it's easy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what side bending looks like if I just yank my head from side to side, which is a rather uncomfortable experience, and it's poppy and cracky and loud. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pressurize my whole system. And now I empty the right forehead, right eye, nose, mouth. Now I'm going to go through the cervical spine. Now I'm going through the lumbar, the thoracic spine. Lumbar spine. I let the pressure bring me back to the midline, no pinching, no popping. Now I empty the top to the bottom on the left. Forehead, eye, nose, mouth, jaw, left neck, now thoracic, lumbar, sacrum pelvis. You probably could see also, it's another great place to see that my head comes up off of my body. And then when I exhale, it not only comes back to the midline, it comes back, it compresses back into my spine. That little motion makes a world of difference when it comes to wear and tear. So let me do that a little bit faster for you. I did that one slow so I could break it down. So let's try. Let's try. Do a couple side bends, just yanking your head around. Don't pay any attention to your breathing. Or if you want to pay some attention to your breathing, inhale to the side, exhale backward, back to the midline. Inhale to the side, or other way, exhale. You know, do the old way of breathing, the old way of breathing. Do the way of breathing that we're used to where we inhale, exhale, and compare it to when we do pressure change. So just do a little bit of side bending, and then we will go ahead and pressurize the whole system. Now pressurize, so hard to fit everything into the camera. Okay. So we're going to pressurize the whole system. Feel the fluid level dropping down. Feel it lift the pelvic floor. When it lifts the pelvic floor, you'll inhale, engage on the other side of the body with the toes, spread the fingers and palms. But the exhale is like you're holding a ball, an inflated ball underwater, and it just comes back up when you let it go. So you're going to take the pressure off it, it just lifts back up. Okay, and I want you to notice that when you inhale, you'll feel a whole column of pressure come up the side of your body. That column of pressure not only takes your head to the side, but it lifts it up. And when you let that column of pressure out, it brings you back to the midline. Let's do a couple more of those side to side. Let me put on my gallery view. There we go. So I can see everybody. We are 7 minutes past the hour. If you're not in a rush, I will go through flexion extension. We have time? Can you give me 5 more minutes? Yes? Beautiful. So flexion extension. Flexion extension. Now, instead of filling one side of the body or the other side, now what I want you to do, just sitting in place, do your arm and leg breathing. See if you can fill the front of the body preferentially to the back, and then see if you can fill the back preferentially to the front. So you fill the front preferentially to the back, and then you empty the front, and then you fill the back. And you'll notice that when you do this, it displaces you slightly in the front and back way. So empty the front of the body. And then we're going to fill the back of the body. Empty the back of the body. Now I'm going to do this, and I'm going to let it create flexion and extension in my neck. So my hand is going to indicate my water level, or my fluid level, my pressure level, I guess is the best way to say it. But I tend to think of it as it's a fluid pressure. So it is fluid. Okay. So I'm going to first pressurize the whole system with arms and legs. Now I've emptied my forehead, I've emptied my eyes, my nose, my mouth, the front of my throat. Now my front of my throat, when I stop, my neck is gonna keep moving, but nothing else is gonna move as I go thorax, abdomen, pelvic floor. Then I'm gonna inhale up the back. I let the pressure come up the back of my neck, lift my vertebra, my skull up. At the same time, it pushes me forward. And I let that pressure out, it brings me back to neutral. Now I'm going to empty the back of the head. This space here underneath the skull and the neck. Thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, pelvis, fill the front. Let the pressure out of the front, especially underneath the chin. Letting the pressure out underneath the chin is what will bring your head back to vertical in a way that doesn't pinch anything at the back. You have to let this pressure out as you exhale to come back forward. So you don't have to go as far back as I just did, right? Even if you're just doing this. But the main thing is, feel the emptiness go all the way down the back of the body. Feel it generate a little bit of change of the entire spine. Well, first the skull and then the spine. Feel it generate a little bit of change the whole way down. Because what we don't want to do is put all of the work of moving in just a couple places on the spine. We want to distribute the work of motion throughout the entire spine. We will be much happier spines if we do that. So let's do some flexion extension. I want pain-free range of motion though. Let me make that very clear. We're not trying to push, we're not trying to force, we're not trying to strain. What we're trying to do is see how much freedom and motion we can generate with emptiness. And then when we inhale, be satisfied with wherever the breath takes you in your pain-free range of motion. If you feel like you're approaching a place where like, oh, that feels like it's gonna pinch, I want you to finish your exhale right in that spot, right? Don't try to push past it. Go up to that point, finish your exhale all the way down to the bottom of your pelvis. And then when you inhale, see if you can take yourself a little deeper into the motion, but not so deep that it causes pinching or pain, right? That's not going to help us increase our healthy range of motion. That's what we're trying to do, is increase our healthy range of motion. So let's just do a couple flexion extensions. Emptying all the way to the bottom of the pelvis, and notice that when you keep emptying, you get more range of motion in your neck. Remember the superpower of the party favor. How was that? Can you feel the pressure move the head in flexion extension? By now, your muscles, you should be getting a sense of how your muscles can start to work like kite strings rather than like towing cables. It's much more pleasant, and it's a lot safer for your connective tissue. When we yank the head around, we put a lot of strain on just a couple tendons and ligaments. When we use pressure gradient change, we don't have to inhibit any muscles. All of our muscles can stay gently engaged. And when they all stay gently engaged, now we can glide the body into different positions, more like kite strings. And this is, and then we won't be and we'll be distributing the wear and tear at all the diaphragmatic attachments, not just a couple. And so I think that we'll stop there, except if there are any questions in the next couple minutes, we can go over them. Let me unmute. Here we go. Okay, I think I unmuted everybody. Did I succeed? Yes, I did. I did my part. Are there any other questions right now? Are there any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Could you say more about the pressure gradient and how that works? It's kind of mystical, the way that works. What do you think is going on there, the way that changes, and you can feel that the pressure change, it's almost by intention.
Well, it's it doesn't have to just be by intention. The truth is that when you are right and left side breathing, you're changing the pressure because you are engaging the arm and leg on each side of the body helps fully recruit all the diaphragms on that side of the body. And that helps people access this sense of engaging, inhaling on one side more than, and inhaling and exhaling more on one side of the body.
Are we actually getting more pressure? I mean, I think in terms of breathing, that the breath just goes into the lungs and out, and that doesn't, and then gets into the blood through there. So how is it that we're feeling that instantly, feeling the pressure change and feeling the...
Because the diaphragm isn't just moving air, it's moving fluid. It's moving, and so it's moving everything. It's moving the air in and out of the lung.
So the diaphragms are moving, all the little diaphragms are moving with the big diaphragm.
All the little diaphragms are moving with the big diaphragm, and when they all work together, their effects are more than additive.
Got it. Really?
Right? It's like if you're paddling a canoe with a bunch of other people, and if everybody's on the same stroke, you will fly. You will glide like in beautifully and smoothly and quietly through the water. But if everybody is like doing their own stroke and not, then you won't get that same kind of coordinated fluid motion. So, but the thing is, the reason that those other diaphragms come online is because you're affecting the fluid pressure in the extracellular spaces. Well, in the entire body, you're affecting the fluid pressure, but you're particularly having an effect on the fluid pressure in the extracellular spaces in the body.
Okay, so it's a fluid pressure, it's not a gas pressure.
Exactly. The pressure change you feel in your head is not a gas pressure. The gas pressure is just what you feel coming in and out of your lungs. The reason the organ pipes work, the reason that we can take a really big breath in and I can just relax and release it softly, and it will make no noise, and I won't have air blasting out of my nostrils, is that most of the pressure I feel in my chest when I breathe is not air, it's fluid.
Wow. And
so when I allow myself, and I use the organ pipe image because it gives us this sense that, okay, I can release the pressure through these organ pipes throughout the top of my head. But what we're really doing is we're just surrendering and relaxing the back of the diaphragm, not trying to control the outflow by the pressure in our chest wall or by holding, by controlling the diaphragm. We're releasing the pressure by full relaxation and not worrying about what's going to happen with our nostrils. And when we feel that we can just let it go, the fluid is free to move, and we don't have a lot of pressure on the airways anymore. If I try to control my exhalation by kind of bracing my chest a little bit so that I can let the air out slowly, because I'm afraid that now I have to squeeze all this air out of these little holes, all this pressure. When we do that, when we brace the chest, we actually maintain stiffness in the chest wall, right? Because everything, the fluid pressure creates stiffness, rigidity. We maintain stiffness in the chest wall, and that maintains pressure on the airways, and then breath does spurt out. But if we just relax and surrender and release through our imaginary organ pipes, the breath comes out in a trickle, because most of this pressure is fluid. So it will never come out of our noses. But the diaphragm on each side, the thoracic diaphragm, is affecting a fluid column. Everything above it and below it, there's a fluid column. And because we can really be selective about where we're going to relax our diaphragm, we can really have a quite precise, probably far more precise control than I know of at this point in time.
You think we're getting conscious control of these diaphragms then by putting awareness in them, like in the eyeball?
I mean, can you feel that you're able to empty one side more than the
Oh,
other?
yeah, it's weird. I do. It's I do feel that, yes.
And so the thing is, when we try to yank our muscles, our bones around with our muscles, but we don't let pressure. If I try to turn my head this way, but I don't let the pressure, the fluid pressure move by relaxing this side of my body, if I don't let this pressure out before I try to yank, now this is like having a golf ball in the door hinges when you're trying to slam them, right? You're not going to be able to, because you have this chunk of pressure here, and I have to smush that pressure with muscular effort. And that means that muscles over here have to overstretch to go around that fluid pressure block. So we want to, so the emptying allows us to remove that fluid pressure block and use this really, it's a very deep mechanism for motion that that we're all just starting to explore.
Yeah, very beautiful. Really, really nice.
Any other question for today? And you know, of course, office hours are this Wednesday. I had a little technical error last time. I thought I'd be able to start it on my phone, and it didn't work. And then so I'm sorry if anybody showed up and I wasn't there yet. I didn't get there till late. David and I were the only ones that were still around by the time I got my computer on. But there will be office hours this week, so I'm totally available to answer more questions. We'll do, I think we'll be doing a little guided practice as well, but we'll do both of those things this Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Anything else for today? We're good? We're good?
Question.
Thank you so much for coming. Remember, this is a work in progress. I'm really open to your feedback. If you have anything, if you're like, Anjani, that slideshow was really distracting, like anything like that, which I think it probably was. So I'm sorry it didn't work out the way I wanted